when subpoenaed Trump lawyer Boris Epshteyn joined me Friday, along with a Trump White House vet and an organizer of the January 6th rally. This was a chance to actually learn new things and get people on the record. Now, there are many types of questions here, but it all starts with the plot to use fraudulent or alternate electors to override the votes in these states that Biden won, which the authorities in the states found he won, which the courts then affirmed. So installing false and fraudulent electors that you call alternates in those states looks like stealing an election and an attempt to do so. Now, under questioning, Epshteyn admitted he was in on that plot. Did you ever make calls like that regarding what you're calling these alternate electors?
I was quoted in the Washington Post in the last 24 hours. Yes, I was part of the process to make sure there were alternate electors for when, as we hoped, the challenges to the seated electors would be heard and would be successful per the 12th Amendment of the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act.
Epshteyn admitting a bombshell on live TV. He personally tried to install those electors, which would override the actual lawful votes in that state. Understandably, this is sparking headlines about a lawyer fessing up the plot and, quote, brazenly admitting to the scheme. CNN running with the news under the headline, Trump advisor acknowledges being part of 2020 alternate electors plot. The plan was to abuse partisan power at the state level to steal the election. The failed plan is to commit the ultimate mass voter fraud. And you have to understand how this would work in their minds, which we're learning more about from the evidence. The idea was they would somehow create enough chaos and confusion through these slates of electors who were claiming to override the votes that Biden won in those states, and that they might use that confusion through Congress to then deny the certification of the election, and then use that to somehow keep Trump in office, even though he lost, to end American democracy. Epshteyn insists they, in their opinion, viewed their plan as a, quote, legal way to overturn the results. But there are many ways this plot could be deemed criminal, from standard forgery and fraud to conspiring to hinder the administration of U.S. law to breaking other election laws. And as a matter of lawyering, Epshteyn was clear on another point. He wasn't doing this alone. This was not a solo dolo kind of plot. He told me, Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani led it all as he went about all of those offbeat press conferences and spread conspiracy theories.
Everything that was done illegally by the Trump legal team, according to the rules and under the leadership of Rudy Giuliani. We fought for the truth.
Good to know it was all under Giuliani's leadership, from the lawyer who worked alongside him. That's what we call confirmation on the record, that what may become a receipt. It's from an inside player. And it fits into what the other evidence and reporting suggests, because as I mentioned, some of what we know, we only know because of the work of so many journalists, print, and other mediums. Giuliani was reportedly the ringleader, trying to overturn the election through electors in 7 states, possibly more we don't know about yet. None of this is a drill. What may have looked quite absurd and futile and even not that threatening to democracy in the moment, and what did fail, we are learning, if we pay attention seriously, was actually a more organized plot to combine forgery, lies, and maybe some quasi-legal methods, which is to say it may be true that some of the aspects, while unsavory, would not be technically crimes. But put it all together to try to turn the January 6th ceremonial certification into a procedural bloodbath, where there would be fights in our fact-free media landscape on the internet about which electors really were real. And wait, there are these questions. And look at this forged document. Epshteyn and Bannon were pumping up Pence's supposed power as they went into this process. And even though everyone knew which states Biden won, and we have a process for that with secretaries of state and nonpartisan oversight and the courts, we have to be very clear here. This is why I'm reporting this out for you with the information from other journalists, as well as our own primary reporting here on the beat, as well as our interviews. These lawyers thought if they had enough Trump electors in those Biden states and they stoked enough disinformation, enough questions, enough lies, this would be a tangible step to steal the whole thing, with pressure on Vice President Pence to claim Trump won, or, short of that, to get him to at least use the electoral mess that they made, the confusion about the electors that is a product of their forgeries, to then try to claim that day that the electors for each state were somehow in legitimate doubt. They weren't, legally or factually, but that would be the maneuver. And remember, people didn't know how Pence would ultimately come down. That's why I mentioned that some of these things look less scary when you know the ending, like watching a scary movie the second time. But this is not a movie, and there were people trying to get this done, and a different official or a different vice president or a future election might roll differently. Because Pence was in on everything Trump ever wanted him to do until January 6th. When he broke with the authoritarian plot. Low bar, and also it'll help keep you out of jail if you don't, try to break election law, but that's when he broke. And as reporters noted at the time, as Rachel recently broadcast, Pence added new text to the usual process there. It all sounds pretty dry and technical, so I'm about to play you just the key part. I want you to listen for where Pence says the parliamentarian advises that the certificate of votes is the only certificate and has the proper authority to appoint these electors. As you listen to this right now, I want you to keep in mind, whether you normally speak Pence's language, this is how in Pence-ese you say, I'm not helping stage a coup through fake electors.
After ascertainment has been had that the certificates are authentic and correct in form, the tellers will announce the votes cast by the electors for each state, beginning with Alabama, which the parliamentarians advise me is the only certificate of vote from that state and purports to be a return from the state that has annexed to it a certificate from an authority of that state.
That was his procedural reference to the electors' plot, best we can tell, staking part of his apparent pushback on what, quote, the parliamentarian advised him. It stood out then. It stands out more now. And while the Trump lawyers insist that they had plans to submit slates through what they view as proper procedures, and they are entitled to their defense, we want to give you all the facts. Keep in mind that, one, there are laws criminalizing any misuse of authority to interfere with elections. Wonder if Pence's lawyer told him about that. And two, forgery is a separate and pretty clear-cut crime if you have lies in writing submitted to official departments like the government or courts, etc. Three, if investigators were to link any of this to the storming of the Capitol itself, which Epstein did deny to us on Friday, you could have separate exposure for conspiracy. And four, lawyers lose their privilege if they're found to be planning any future crime or fraud, even if someone else is the one doing the potential later crime. So that's a lot. As for the piece about what is indictable, here's Michigan's Attorney General on one part of this.
Under state law, I think clearly you have forgery of a public record, which is a 14-year offense, and election law forgery, which is a 5-year offense. This is a matter that is best investigated and potentially prosecuted by the feds.
Both of us have been asked a lot as this has come out, what was legal, what was illegal, and I think it's important to emphasize here that this is all unprecedented.
Best prosecuted by the feds. And tonight we know some authorities have already made an official referral to the Justice Department about this. That's feds. Other probes may be in the works without public confirmation at the state and local level. And there's those open cases I mentioned.